Police are killing COVID-19. So the paper tells us that public enemies, that's what the police are being called this rainy morning. We're told cases of brutal crackdown on curfew violators and pocketing of bribes, I mean, what's new, to let busloads of people across the country boundaries are among the crimes by law enforcers that are undermining the efforts to curb the spread of the deadly COVID-19, or rather coronavirus.
Yes, and the Standard here describing the police as one of the weak links. This, of course, is because some of them are not abiding even by those very standards that they're supposed to be enforcing. I remember, and this I physically saw, is a vehicle, a police vehicle, which had quite a number of police. There must have been maybe about 8 or 9 at the back, and none of them was wearing masks. And I thought to myself, how is it that the law enforcers who are supposed to ensure that we are following these rules, they themselves do not follow it, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and even those who are arrested are bundled into those are they Land Rovers? I don't know what they are. And as you can see on page 2 of the Standard, some 21 youth arrested near Nakuru Golf Club for claims that they did not adhere to the public health guidelines on COVID-19. Some of them they are busy climbing into one of these vehicles, and you can see there's more than 3 of them. So I mean, if you're talking about being 6 feet apart, they're not wearing masks. So if anyway, they were partying, so probably they have exposed one another to COVID-19 if any one of them had it. But just to think about it, the measures that are put in place sometimes could pose a danger, and at the same time, some of the brutal ways that these people, the offenders, are dealt with are not quite ideal, because we're having a Nathan Kibet on page 3 this morning having a broken leg after being clobbered by police officers enforcing a curfew. It's quite unfortunate, but then again, I mean, why were we expecting anything different? I think COVID-19 is just exposing some of the problems that we have in this country that we should have been very proactive in handling before it even came to us or came to the world.
All right, and that picture that you are seeing just there on page 2 is also to a story. NIS gets billions to spy on patients. Medics warn virus war is militarized. And of course, there's been this debate world over that we cannot militarize the fact that we want to ensure that we have the pandemic dealt with. But again, it's a difficult thing because we've had the CS and the Ministry of Health come out time and again and give, guidelines on how we ought to carry ourselves, but these have not been followed. So of course the question is, will the police just sit back and not enforce? Of course they would have to enforce, but the question is, with how much force do they do this?
And at the same time, why is it a warning? Because militarizing, well, I mean, is it because of the possible force? Because the world over, we have seen the military being activated to deal with, COVID-19. So is it that the methods are more harsh because the military has come in play, or why is it a warning? That would be my question, because I would expect that to be a measure that would happen from day one, because this is a threat to the country, if you ask me.
Okay, and well, 1.3 billion given to NIS for them to ensure that they do that, and to continue ensuring that they have surveillance and watch. And one might ask, why does NIS need the money? But there's even an incident that is quoted here of a lady who refused to go into quarantine and disappeared into some hotel somewhere, but NIS managed to trace her down and of course take her to forced quarantine. So there's definitely an element that requires the authorities to come in and enforce where there's need for that to be done.
Yeah, it's quite prudent. And of course, I'm just flipping through the papers and I'm seeing one of, Mike Sonko wearing a T-shirt written on "Never Give Up." I mean, it's quite, relevant to his circumstances right now. And he has indeed vowed never to give up. But let's shift gears to the Daily Nation this morning. More cash in your pocket this month is what we are being promised. Cost of bread, milk, medical and agricultural pest control products to remain the same after MPs yesterday rejected the National Treasury proposal that would have introduced tax on the items, arguing that doing so would hurt ordinary Kenyans. I think this is, a more happier top story than what we saw on the other paper. But then mystery politicians also, Dream City has been demolished. I mean, some of our trends are still making it to the papers, but then I think the main story is quite good for Kenyans.
Yeah, and it also gives a breakdown of how there's more money in your pocket, courtesy of what the government has done, and even gives you a breakdown. For instance, if you're earning 30,000, you're likely to get 2,000 more into your earn, and this is, of course, as a result of maximum pay applicable being dropped from 25 to from 30 to 25, and it gives you a clear breakdown of that. But again, also remember there are many companies that have given pay cuts to their employees just to try and stay afloat. So it's kind of trying to balance. But of course, the economists do tell us that if there's more money in Kenyans' pockets, then there's likelihood of the economy, taking a better blow by virtue of the fact that we have money that is going around, as opposed to having people who do not have money at all.
Yeah, and even as far as compliance with the rules right now, it would be easier to have people complying if they were not feeling economically strained. They would not feel the need to get out and try and work overtime or work after hours and, endanger themselves. But in the back of their minds, they're justifying it because they do need more money in their pockets. So if as much as the government would do or Parliament would do to ensure that this is a reality for Kenyans, I think that would be a very good thing. And I think we still have COVID-19, treating COVID-19 costs making it to the papers. We are told about the expenses that you would have to contend with if you were to seek treatment for that. And this is on page 9 of the Daily Nation this morning. And it's quite interesting. I'm sure you'd want to know, if you're watching at home, that it would cost 47,000 shillings for a patient to a patient for accommodation at a private hospital in just 24 hours, and then 8,680 the cost of a set of personal protective equipment to be used by health workers. So if the disease seems like an abstract notion, then the fact that you would have to cough up upwards of 50,000 shillings should actually scare most people straight, I think.
Well, yes, and of course this being a very trying time, because if you find yourself in that position, then it may not be as good as, because 47,000, honestly speaking, is far reach for majority of the people. But one of the things that people have also been talking about is a total lockdown. I'm not sure what really a total lockdown looks like, because different countries have done it differently. But page 6 of the Nation, you have Uhuru ruling out total lockdown to curb the virus. So whatever a total lockdown looks like in your eyes, according to Uhuru Kenyatta, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, that's not a simple thing, because even countries like the United States that are perceived to be quite developed and quite with it as far as their economies are struggling with it. But then for them it was quite necessary because they're losing tens of thousands of people to COVID-19. But then where we are at right now, I would agree with the president. I don't think it's necessary right now, as long as we put in the measures. I mean, why would that even be put in place? We are really struggling with the partial one right now, and the economy was already circling down the drain. So if that is enforced, I mean, that would be terrible, terrible news for everyone, I think.
Well, some might argue that you'd rather have an economy that is dying, but a workforce that is alive, that is able to bring back this economy, than to have a workforce that is continuing but is sick, and eventually, the economy would still take a blow. So I guess it's catch-22, but truth of the matter is, according to the president, that they're going to put measures in place that will ensure we don't have to go into a total lockdown. And of course, again, I repeat, from the economist perspective, it is better to have money going round in people's pockets and trade going on, which is why we also have essential services like supermarkets and distributors of food still going on, than to totally lock that down and try and distribute that food, because eventually you cripple the whole country.
I think if everyone plays their part, this would not be a necessity at all, and the spread won't be as much as we see in other countries in Europe and the United States. And, if we are well informed and we become more clever with how we are conducting business and doing our own revenue earning or economic activities, then we would actually fare well without a complete lockdown. And as far as information goes, take a look at page 8 of the Daily Nation. A woman has been pictured arrested there, trying to protect herself from the virus. But the rag that is across her face, I mean, it leaves so much to be desired. And the caption for this, picture by Laban Wagola says, "A woman with only her nose covered with a flimsy handkerchief in Nyerere Avenue in Mombasa on April the 20th. The effectiveness of the fabric is doubtful and her mouth is uncovered, defeating efforts to protect herself from the virus." And this, I mean, you can imagine if she walked to the ferry or she was going into a crowded market. I don't think, particularly in remote areas, people really understand what this is all about. When you're covering your nose alone.
I'm not sure if it's just remote areas, because I've seen, I mean, there's a picture that we had on Monday on The Nation, I believe, or The Standard, where you have people on a border, 4 of them, with masks, but all their masks on their chin. And I've seen police officers like doing the same thing. They stop you and they have their mask on the chin. So it really beats the whole purpose of wearing that mask. But like you mentioned, if everybody did their part. Now, the key word there is if. And evidence has shown us so far, in Kenya particularly, that that's not about to happen, because it looks like nobody wants to do their part or are not ready to do their part. We have people going from party after party. Remember, we also had an incident where we had one of the bosses send an ambulance to the youth who were
some drunk kids. Yeah, it's quite funny. And one thing with the remote areas is that the perception that this is a foreign thing. I was listening to a friend of mine who told me they went to a funeral masked and they were laughed at because everyone was mocking them, telling them that they are afraid to die. This is why they're wearing masks. And then there's one here who says that we get insulted in the villages. Our people think that this is a disease for foreigners and people who travel abroad. So while there are those who are more informed and are taking measures, there are those who are actually mocking those efforts. So it's quite, I mean, I think it's down to individual effort. Stick to your guns. Don't let them convince you otherwise.
All right.
That, I think,
yeah, that brings us to just about 28 minutes after 7. We're going to take a break, but a quick reminder of that question that we are asking today, and that is in regards to your county government, because shortly we'd like to be speaking to a governor and finding out how they are dealing with the COVID-19 issues in their county, and that's Machakos County. Is your county government well prepared to deal with COVID-19 pandemic? We take that break. We'll be right back.